Welcome to The Buzz. I'm your host, George Bissell. Joining me is Dave Chauvin. We're here to talk about third base today. I got a really exciting show planned. We got a lot to get to. Dave, what's going on, buddy? Good to have you back on.
Yeah, good to be back. Excited to get into this. Fun position.
So, The Buzz is our new daily fantasy baseball newsletter. We've been up and running for a couple weeks now. We've been rolling out some really great content as part of our positional preview series. That includes our 2025 rankings, which we're going to get into the third base ones today. Dave has been doing an outstanding early NFBC average draft position analysis article every week that drops on Tuesday. That's one of the best things out there that I've seen. It really goes in depth on his position. It outlines his strategy. We'll get into that on today's show as well. We also have our dynasty rankings. I'm putting out like 5,000 words was the third base installment this week. It's taking years off my life to do this, but I'm doing it for you, the people watching this and listening to this. We also do our sleeper candidates, and we have a great Ask the Experts series. Our third base one this week was Ryan Bloomfield from Baseball HQ. And then next week, we'll have Chris Clegg of Dynasty Dugout. He's one of the smartest minds out there in the prospect space at the moment. So he's been doing a fantastic job for years now, and really excited to get his thoughts on some of the big name prospects at shortstop this week. So you can find the link in the description to access all of our content at the Buzz. I say this, support content creators, support good work. If you like what you're doing, what we're doing, the best way you can support us is by subscribing right now and following along as we get into spring training. Um, so really quick, we didn't do this on the last show, and I think we should. Can we give people a little bit of our background and how we arrived here? I'll start with you, Dave. Can you tell us a little bit about your arrival here at the Buzz?
Yeah, so it's been a long time. I've been writing in the industry. We've been writing at RotoWorld since 2012. A lot of the stuff that George and I do there is just the player news blurbs that you guys are reading every day. They might not get accredited to us, but we're the guys behind the scenes doing a lot of that work there. Um, yeah, just been grinding away since then. Before that, I was at the Hardball Times for a little bit. I've contributed to a few other sites along the way.
Yeah, so we've been doing this a long time, and we basically would text each other all the time, and that became the genesis for this idea. It was, hey, let's start this little project together and see where it takes us. So if you're watching this video, that's our story right now, and we're excited to have you all with us. So, like Dave said, I've been at Roto World since 2018. Prior to that, I had stints with Baseball Prospectus and the Dynasty Guru going back to 2014. And last year, I was the lead dynasty analyst for Fantrax. So, doing a lot professionally over the years, we got a lot of experience in this field, and we thought it would be fun to collaborate on this project and see where it leads us. So, make sure you subscribe to the Buzz, and you'll get all our stuff there. All right, enough pleasantries and introductions. Let's get right to it. Third base. Dave, I'll start with your biggest takeaways at the hot corner that fantasy managers need to know going into 2025.
Yeah, so just looking at the position as a whole, the top of the position, there's a clear-cut top five that have kind of separated themselves from the group altogether. Uh, you know, we may have them in a little bit of a different order. ADP might have them in a little bit of a different order, but Jose Ramirez is the clear top guy. Then you got Jazz Chisholm, Manny Machado, Austin Riley, Rafael Devers, and some kind of jumble in that next group before you drop down like 50 picks to Mark Vientos. So if you want one of those top guys, you got to prepare to get him, in the top 2 rounds, 3 rounds.
I think one of the things that stood out when I read your analysis and looked at your rankings was I think we're a bit higher on Manny Machado than where he's going to go in most drafts. He kind of stands out to me as the guy who I think makes a lot of sense for fantasy managers to target because there is a little bit of a discount because of the age and maybe the perceived lack of huge upside there. Does that kind of stand out to you so far in terms of where Machado is going versus where we think he's going to end up?
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. Of those top five guys, Ramirez is, top five pick pretty much. Chisholm is the second guy, and he's being pushed up. He's probably going to be an early second rounder. I actually like Machado third of that group. I like him better than Riley and Devers. I like the speed contributions, and I really like, he got off to a slow start last year, but once he finally, shook the rust off, he really got it going and had a huge second half. I think that's going to carry over.
I think Austin Riley's going to bounce back this year. I think you look at any sort of projection, he's a 30 homer lock. The one that's interested me is Rafael Devers because I think a lot of the fantasy industry is down on him collectively. A lot of the opinions I've seen out there are pretty negative because he dealt with issues with both of his shoulders last year. He had some knee issues as well. There's sort of the rumblings that the Red Sox are going to make a big move and bring in a third baseman, whether it's Nolan Arenado or Alex Bregman. As we talk on this show, we don't know. They haven't done either of those moves yet. So Devers is still their third baseman, but I kind of get the sense that the industry as a whole is a little bit down on Devers. So do you think it's possible he slips a little bit in some drafts?
It's possible. It hasn't been happening yet, but I definitely could see that happening, especially if they do bring in someone else to play third base. Something's got to give if they do that.
Mark Vientos, guy I found myself liking more and more as we kind of dragged on with the series, especially when I dug into things from a long-term standpoint. I think making the leap from lefty mashing platoon bat to, middle of the order force, who's going to be batting behind Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto, I think that gives him a shot to potentially finish in the top five. Where do you stand on his sort of upside this year, and how aggressive would you be on Mark Vientos?
Yeah, I definitely could see that coming. I mean, a lot of times you see guys like that, the top prospect who has a huge postseason generally gets a huge bump up in their price. He's going around pick 90 right now. I could see that, even bumping up around before the season starts. I'm curious to see whether or not Pete Alonso returns to that lineup, to see where exactly he's going to be hitting. But obviously behind Lindor and Soto, it's going to lead to plenty of RBI chances. And I think he's probably a 30 homer guy there.
Yeah, that feels like a top five guy to me. I think I'll ask you about your strategy here in a second, but my ideal, sort of strategic approach here would be, especially if I'm in an auction, I prefer auctions to snake drafts. I like having the whole player pool available. I like the different roster construction angles that creates. I think my approach would be to throw out Mark Vientos as sort of one of my first guys at the position, probably the first guy. I'd want him off the board immediately. And if I didn't get him, then I would be super aggressive on a guy like Manny Machado because I know that the guy I probably wanted is gone.
Yeah.
So
There's nothing worse than a snake draft than hoping, planning around getting a guy later, then someone jumps him around and you have no contingency options and you're, kind of screwed at the position.
yeah, so I would throw Vientos out. I'd stick firm to my number and then have my fallback options led by Machado ready to go after that. So you broke down your strategy in your NFBC early average draft position article. Can you take fantasy managers through sort of your approach to the position and what you're trying to do this year going into spring training?
Sure. Like George said, I've been breaking down every position kind of as we go. So I'm doing it on their own, and at the end, I'll kind of put it together and see, where I'm targeting specific guys in each rounds based on what's available at the other positions. But just looking at the third base position, yeah, I like Jose Ramirez, but he's not someone you can bet on getting because you don't know where your pick's going to be in the first round, and I don't know if he's going to be someone I'm looking at there. I like Chisholm, but again, he's going to cost a second round pick. I think even if he hits his upside, that's probably about where he should be going. So maybe it's neutral. I don't see a whole lot of value there. Of those early five, if I like anyone, it would be Machado because he gives you the speed that Riley and Devers don't. But the guys that pop off, it really is the biggest values on my board are Alex Bregman and Matt Chapman, which is surprising because he's a player I've never been on before. But he's also a player who's never displayed any sort of speed before that came completely out of nowhere last year. Like when I was doing my projections and going through and looking at this, he's the guy who had, 11 stolen bases throughout his entire career going into last year. And then he's 15 of 17 for the Giants last year. Like just completely crazy adding value that you weren't expecting while he still, hit 27 homers, hit for a neutral average. He's the guy I have like seventh or eighth at the position, but he's going like, 14th or 15th, by ADP. So he pops as a huge value. Behind them, maybe Alec Bohm and maybe Eugenio Suarez are guys that also are showing up as big values on my board.
I think what stands out when you look at the position is after you get past that elite tier, whether it's four or five names, or if you think Mark Vientos is there, six guys, a half dozen, the rest of the starting caliber players are pretty good. Like there's no real weak spot at position. The replacement level kind of guys I think are pretty strong at the hot corners. So even if you miss out on one of those elite options, I think you're generally doing okay at the position, which can't be said about a lot of other spots like second base we talked about last week. There's a huge drop off with that position. So one of the things that was interesting when I read your analysis, and it's a guy I'm extremely high on, and frankly, I don't think he's going to be a sleeper at all. We didn't even cover him in our sleeper candidates article because, like, what's the point? Everyone's going to be in on this guy, and that's Matt Shaw, the top prospect for the Chicago Cubs. They basically cleared out a expressway sized lane for him to open the season as the Cubs starting third baseman. He basically would have to crater in spring training to not end up with the job. And I think he's got sort of that, 15 to 20 homer, 20 steal upside. He kind of does it all. There aren't a lot of weaknesses to his game, really polished prospect. I think he checks all the boxes. And I think by the time he starts making some noise in spring training, he's not going to be this under the radar guy you can get in the middle rounds. Fantasy managers are going to be pretty aggressive on him. You kind of agree that he's going to be one of those helium guys, it feels like this spring.
Absolutely. I mean, a guy I'm definitely on. He pops overall as the biggest value on my board right now. And usually these top prospects that, have clear path to playing time, they're guys that usually get pushed up the board even earlier in the draft season. And right now, I mean, he's sitting with an ADP around pick 230, and he's only gone as high as like pick 170 within the last, couple of weeks. I definitely see that, rising substantially. I see him cracking that top 150 easy, could be even higher than that. But yeah, he's great batch ball skills. I think he's going to hit for an average that's not going to kill you, and he's a 2020 threat in his first season, and that has just so much value.
I think the power speed combo, it makes him a super high floor type of guy. And I want to see what happens there. And I think he's going to be the biggest sleeper at the position. He's not even going to be a sleeper. He's wide awake. This is just
Absolutely.
because we could have done 5 minutes on him, but I think he's going to get pushed up in drafts to the point that it might not even be a value at that point. So definitely a guy to watch in spring training, though. Some of the guys we disagreed on, I sort of put this in the X factors department. These are the real wild cards at the position. Junior Caminero, Royce Lewis, Isaac Paredes, and Eugenio Suarez. I think of that quartet, Caminero is the guy that stands out to me where we really diverged in how we feel about him because I think it's a lot. I think there's a greater likelihood that he reaches his sort of ceiling this year than you believe. Can you give us the negative take, Dave? I want to hear some cynicism here. Why are you not as optimistic on Junior Caminero?
With him, I mean, let me preface it by saying first, I generally prefer like the old and boring types, and I'm not usually the one who's up on the up and coming prospects. I'll let someone beat me with them instead of, reaching to get him in the draft. I don't doubt the talent at all, and I think he's going to be, have a hugely successful career. And he didn't really look overmatched, in his 40, 43 games, whatever it was last year. I just, I don't know. I can't get there at the price right now. I think that the Rays lineup as a whole is kind of underwhelming to me. So I think his counting stats aren't going to quite be there, to where the other guys are who are being drafted in his range. And, I don't think he's going to really run it all. So, he's a four category guy at best. And, I'm not sure that the counting stats get me to where I need him to be just at the draft price.
Great point about the speed. You're right. He's not going to run it all. And I think what's interesting is we've been doing this like a long time at Roto World, and we've seen these types of players, we've seen these sort of types of prospects before, where sometimes, development's not linear. They don't immediately become fantasy superstars. I would normally say this about Caminero. I view him as a huge potential bust candidate, and that potential's still there. I'm not ruling that out. But I think what's different this year is the setting with Tampa Bay going to George
Yeah.
Steinbrenner Field. We talked about this on last week's show. We talked about it throughout our position preview series. I think that really buoys sort of the over the fence power ceiling, or the floor, I should say, to the point where I think you can almost lock in 25 to 30 homers, assuming he's healthy. I just his raw power based on everything we've seen at the minor league level and even in his brief time in the majors, it's real, it's going to play, and I think he's going to get a boost in that ballpark. So I don't see a ton of risk here relative to how I would view him if they were still in Tropicana Field with that lackluster supporting cast. I think the way the Rays have constructed their team, they're counting on him sort of taking a step forward as that middle of the order bat. So I'm way more optimistic than I thought it was going to be. I think this is going to be a huge year, and I don't see the downside there. So I'm willing to take the risk, given how the rest of the position looks, where you could still, you know, get someone else to pair with him as a fallback in case something goes completely haywire. You could get someone in the later rounds to pair with him, like a Suarez, somebody like that,
Right.
who kind of give you some insurance there. Do you kind of like that approach, especially with a guy like Caminero or Royce Lewis, where you can get somebody as a fallback option as a backup plan?
Yeah, for sure. And with Caminera, I don't even think you have to. Like you mentioned, I think the power floor is high enough that even if he doesn't, return a profit from that position, I don't think he's going to kill you. I think he's going to be in that 25 to 30 homer range, and I think he's going to be fine. I just think he's been pushed up a little higher. Maybe he's neutral, maybe he's, a slight negative on my board. I just like other guys in that range better. I'm not really against him. It's just I prefer some other options.
Yeah, see, Dave's doing the smart thing here, and I'm just doing what I've done throughout my career as an analyst, where I'm just taking the flashy new guy and betting on some statistical leap we haven't seen yet. So, yeah, history tends to repeat itself. So, look, I'm in. Why not? If you're wrong, you're wrong, but it's fun. It's fun now.
It is fun to be on those guys for sure.
Choose fun, embrace the risk. Speaking of risk, any of the other three guys that you want to touch on, I think Lewis is it's kind of boring to keep having the same conversation with him. We know the physical issues. I think it's kind of baked into the price at this point on draft day. Paredes is the
Yeah,
guy
for
I
me
think.
for me with Lewis, it's not even. I mean, it is the physical issues. I mean, he hasn't had more than 300 at bats in a big league season. I don't think he's played a full season at all. Big leagues or minors since 2019. Um, but he's kind of always had this thing where you think that if he's in the lineup, he's going to produce. And his last stint in the majors last year, after his last injury, the production wasn't even there, and he stopped running completely, which the Twins probably are having him do just because they want to keep him healthy. We've seen him do it with Buxton before. They kind of put the reins on him, and if he's not going to run, that's a huge negative for me.
I think the 25 homers though are a lock if he plays like roughly 120 games though. Paredes is the guy I think is it's going to be divisive because I think the projections are going to be all over the place. I've seen numbers in the 30s for home runs this year for him. The one thing we can guarantee is that his sort of approach is tailor-made for that ballpark, and we've kind of touched on him in our series a bunch of times, but I think he's a guy who's interesting in terms of I'd want to throw him out early to see where the rest of my league is.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm also curious with him. The expectation is that he's going to hit second in that lineup. Between Alvarez and Jose Altuve, but maybe Jeremy Pena takes that spot, and maybe Paredes ends up hitting sixth, and I think that could change his projection a lot for me.
so definitely I got to watch in spring training in terms of how the Astros are putting out those lineup cards, what it's looking like, because we could all be wrong, like you said, and Pena gets that spot. So you never know, but I think I just want to see is there someone else who's super high on the projection with Paredes in my league? Like I want to know that early in a draft. I don't want to sit around and wait, especially like an auction is what I'm talking about. I
Yeah,
don't want to sit around for a half hour wondering, oh, am I going to be able to get a discount here? Because it feels like someone's going to be all in on him. I think if you put 12 different fantasy managers in a room, someone is going to be aggressive. So just
yeah, I could
figure
see that.
that out early. Don't wait around until all the other fallback guys are gone. So let's talk about, let's see, some of our sleeper candidates. Give me your favorite sleeper at the position because we wrote about these guys this week and I just think it was a light position for sleepers. There's not a ton of guys out there that we're interested in.
Yeah, it is. It was tough pickings there. The guy that I kind of like the best is Jose Tena with the Nationals. Uh, Assuming that he gets the third base job and they don't just put him in a super utility role. He's especially that late. He's one of the few guys at the position that does offer power and speed. Like I think I only have 9 guys total at the position who I project for double digits in home runs and steals. And of those guys, he's going the latest. So he's definitely someone that I have interest in. Around like what is it, like 370 or something, crazy like that.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at a corner infield spot, he's kind of one of those late round guys that'd be throwing a dart at as a flyer. Guy who stands out for me is Joey Ortiz, and he kind of fits the mold for guy who has the super high floor because he's such a gifted defender. And he's shown a little bit of power, a little bit of speed. I think was sort of a little bit of a change to his offensive approach where maybe he gets a little more selective because he makes so much contact. I think if he starts cutting down on just trying to make contact with everything, which does lead to some weaker contact, I think if he starts, getting more aggressive on pitches he could actually do damage on and starts lifting the ball a little bit more, I think he could make a little bit of a step forward offensively. He doesn't have huge like average exit velocity, barrel rate, so the upside's kind of limited, but if you're talking about somebody in the later rounds who can maybe make a step forward, he's kind of the name that kind of jumps out to me there. So, not a ton of guys. I don't think he's a fantasy superstar, but I think the realistic, like double digit home run and stolen base floor is something you can't overlook when you're filling out the back end of your roster in a really deep Mixed league. So let's end on dynasty discussion because we do this every week. It's my area of the store. I love this stuff. I live for this. Dave, what do you got for me? Who do we want to talk about?
Well, the obvious name, for me is Kobe Mayo. And I love the talent. I love the skills. What's it going to take for him to see, meaningful time with the Orioles this year? Does he need Jackson Holiday to fail or, an injury in the O's infield to, see substantial playing time?
Yeah, you never rule out injury. I mean, the old saying is that talent finds a way. Like if you're good enough, they will make a spot for you. So the Orioles are interesting because they haven't made a lot of moves this offseason. They seem to have this kind of weird designated hitter situation going on. So I think there is a path. And the problem with Mayo is that last year he flopped kind of so spectacularly. Went 4 for 41 with 22 strikeouts in 17 games. I mean, that's not good. So some of the hype and the enthusiasm is dampened a little bit. I think that makes him intriguing because if you believe in the talent, you shouldn't even care about a 50, at bat sample. It shouldn't matter. That's, a couple bad weeks, whatever, for one of the top prospects in the game. And it's not uncommon for guys to struggle. The example I always cite is Alex Bregman. He went like 1 for 50 to start his career, something like that. It was absurd. And he turned out fine. So look, let's not panic. Let's see how he fares in, an extended opportunity. I just think if he's hitting enough at the AAA level, the noise is going to start to build, especially if some of the options the Orioles have in the majors aren't producing. So, look, these types of guys find a way. I'd be betting on the talent. If you're looking at like as a late dart throw in a redraft league, Kobe Mayo is interesting. I don't know that you can afford to stash him for 2 months, but he's a guy who stands out to me as like people are going to be wrong on him if you're dismissing him based on 40 at bats. That's crazy.
Sure. Another guy, the Astros, Cam Smith. Uh, they brought in Paredes, they brought in Christian Walker. Their infield's kind of stocked at the moment. They got Shea Whitcomb hanging around also. Can he play the outfield? Because the Astros could use some outfielders. I just see him having a hard time breaking through in the infield right now, the way the roster is currently constructed.
Yeah, he's a good third baseman though. I sort of like him as a guy who can move quickly through the system. You don't make him arguably the centerpiece of a Kyle Tucker trade if you don't think he's going to be a big part of your future. So he's a guy who was sort of a mid first round pick in the draft, 14th overall out of Florida State. Really good guy who makes contact, does a little bit of everything well. So he went through 3 levels last year in his pro debut. So clearly the Astros liked him. They weren't in a position to get him in the draft. So yeah, I think he could move quickly. And if like a Shea Whitcomb, who was kind of one of my sleepers, if someone like that doesn't pan out, you could see Cam Smith pretty early on as a multi-position guy who fills in at multiple spots. And Paredes has moved around a lot, so he gives them some options at first base too. So yeah, it wouldn't be shocking if like Cam Smith were in the majors around the trade deadline if he gets off to a real nice start this year, first few months.
I think the other guy I had a question on. Looks like you're pretty high on still, based on your rankings. But I don't know if the Reds are is Noelvi Marte. It seems like they just keep bringing in additional infielders just to make things tougher and tougher for him to get on the field.
Yeah, I don't know where his path comes. I did a reaction video on the Gavin Lux trade earlier this week, and I really kind of like Gavin Lux as a fit in that ballpark. I think it's going to work. You have McLean potentially moving to center field to offset that in addition, and they sort of the odd man out because they still have Jeimer Candelario who has to play somewhere. It's probably going to be third base. You have Spencer Steer kind of kicking around too, is probably a first base, corner outfield guy as well. Like there's no spot for him, so he's probably going to go back to AAA. Last year was really discouraging, and part of me wonders if it was environmental factors. Like you serve an 80 game PED suspension, it kind of throws off your normal routines as far as the season goes. You kind of never get right from a preparation standpoint, and we see that with pitchers too. Like Blake Snell signing late kind of threw off his season at the start of the year. Basically, like 3 months went nowhere with him. So yeah, I think I want to see him with a normal spring training and see where it goes from there. Like, but he's not a guy I'm counting on for a huge 2025 impact. And I think that became a lot clearer once they made the Gavin Lux trade that I don't think the Reds are counting on that either.
Yeah, that was kind of my read on it as well. I mean, he's so talented. I'd like to see him put it all together. I don't know if it's going to happen this year.
Probably not. But yeah, if you're in a dynasty league, like I think he's definitely interesting. I had him still 21st at the position from a dynasty standpoint. So that puts him in the like the Michael Garcia, Eugenio Suarez, that type of range. So still somebody long term I think we believe in, but probably need to see something this year. 'Cause last year wasn't good. All right. So, Dave, any final thoughts on third base before we wrap up here? I think it's a really interesting position, and we continue to learn a lot about our process and about all these players every time we go through this for an entire week. So, any final thoughts on third base?
No, I think that sums it up for me. I think, if you're not going to invest in one of those top five options, have a plan, have a fallback option, so you know what you're doing. If someone takes your guy from you, it's a thin position. I know we're going to look at shortstop next week. That's the complete opposite, where there's a ton of great options. So just make sure you have a plan at the position and attack it the way you need to.
And like Dave said, the plan, if you're in an auction, throw out those X factor guys early. See if maybe someone comes in underneath your bid limit where you'd feel comfortable taking a shot there and understand that you're probably gonna, get a value there, and then be ready to spend on the bigger name guys. So throw out the X factors early would be my position. I'd want to get a Caminero out there early, Royce Lewis, Mark Vientos. I want to see what those guys are going for, and the earlier you throw out a guy, sometimes the better the deal ends up being in an auction. So that's one of the things I picked up from years of doing this now is, be aggressive early and see if you can get somebody at a discount that you weren't expecting. So that would be my approach there. So that does it for this week's show. Reminder, everybody, check out the link in the description to find all of our content over at The Buzz. We're doing this, a couple more weeks of our position preview series. So looking forward to keeping that going. Dave keeps cranking out the quality content. So I appreciate you, man. It's been a fun ride so far. Thanks for doing this with me.
Yeah, all good.
So we'll be back next week. We're going to talk shortstops. We've got a lot to get to on that show. So it's going to be another jam-packed edition. For Dave Chauvin, I'm George Bissell saying thanks for watching The Buzz. And until our next episode, so long, everybody.